Welcome to Thinking Deeper by 6-7. Today we're diving into the mind of a man who really took a sledgehammer to one of the biggest ideas in history, the idea of God. We're talking about Robert G. Ingersoll, the great agnostic of the 19th century. We're looking at his lectures and essays, this huge body of work that, well, it just dismantles religious dogma with wit and reason. Our mission today is to figure out how one man argued that an honest God is the noblest work of man, and why he was so convinced that the age of ghosts and superstition had to end.
And it's a huge collision of ideas. You have to imagine the sheer courage it took to say these things back then.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he wasn't just poking holes in the church. He was trying to take down the whole building.
The entire architectural belief that, held society together.
And before we get any further into that dismantling, if you like my channel, please subscribe and press the like button. It really does help us out.
It does.
So let's set the stage. This is not 2024. You can't just tweet a criticism of religion and, go about your day.
Not at all. This is 19th century America. Orthodoxy, strict religious belief, it wasn't just a choice, it was the air you breathed.
Your whole life depended on it.
Right, your social standing, your business, your reputation, everything. And then Ingersoll steps onto the stage, and he was a superstar orator, maybe the most famous of his day.
And what does he say?
He basically says, okay, everyone, time to turn on the lights and stop being afraid of the dark.
And the dark for him was the supernatural. So let's start there with his lecture, The Gods. Because there's one line in it that it anchors his entire worldview. We all know the phrase, God created man in his own image. Well, Ingersoll just flips it completely.
An honest God is the noblest work of man. It's such a brilliant, sharp inversion.
It is.
He's arguing that we have the whole arrow of creation pointing the wrong way. We aren't discovering God. We're inventing him.
It's his mirror theory.
Yeah.
He says if you look at the gods of any society, they look suspiciously like the people who worship them.
Exactly. He treats theology like it's anthropology. He says, look, if you have a tribe that's brutal and warlike, what is their God like?
He's a general.
He's a general, demands sacrifice. He hates the exact same people the tribe hates. But then you look at a society that values, say, philosophy and peace.
And their God is suddenly a wise father figure.
A calm judge, yeah. He even pointed out the physical traits. He'd say things like, the Negroes represented their deities with black skins and curly hair. It wasn't to mock anyone.
No, it was to prove the point.
It was to prove that gods are a projection, a canvas. He had that great line, if triangles had a god, their god would have 3 sides. You can't escape your own reflection.
Which leads right into what he called the manufacture of deities. He describes it almost like a factory process.
The god of the gaps, as it's sometimes called.
Right.
In the ancient world, you hear thunder. You have no idea what atmospheric pressure is or electricity, so the most logical explanation for you is
a giant with a hammer.
Or a chariot pulling the sun across the sky. Ingersoll's point was that gods are just placeholders for, I don't know.
But he gets really serious here. He doesn't just say it's a quaint mistake. He argues that this process, this manufacturing, it actively harmed humanity, especially with medicine.
Yes, this is where he becomes this fierce defender of human life. For centuries, he says, the church said that insanity and disease were caused by evil spirits.
Demon possession.
Demon possession. And if you believe that, you don't look for a neurologist when someone has a seizure.
You call a priest.
You call a priest to perform an exorcism. You're trying to solve a biological problem with a theological tool. And the result, for Ingersoll, was centuries of suffering that didn't need to happen.
He said something like, the church gave crutches, but science cured the lame.
That's the one. He saw religion as a blockade to progress. Every time you say it's God's will, you stop looking for the actual cause for the cure.
And that blockade extends into the afterlife, too. In his lecture, The Ghosts, he talks about how that fear was, well, monetized.
The ghosts. He's talking about the authority of the dead over the living. But yeah, he argues that the whole idea of immortality wasn't some divine revelation. It was born from our own dreams and shadows and, our terror of dying.
And if you can control that fear,
you control the person. He saw the priesthood as a kind of toll booth operator on the highway to eternity. They took this huge, terrifying question, what happens when I die? And they sold a very, very expensive answer.
like a protection racket for your soul.
That is exactly how he framed it. Believe what we say, pay the toll, or the ghosts will get you.
Okay, so he dismantles the idea of God. He exposes the machinery of the church. But then he does what I think is his most entertaining work. He just opens up the Bible. Some mistakes of Moses.
This was his blockbuster lecture. You have to remember, biblical literalism was the standard. People truly believed every single word of the first 5 books was dictated by God.
And Ingersoll reads it like he's a fact checker with a sense of humor. He just applies this common sense to it all, starting with creation.
He points out all the little discrepancies, but his favorite target was the light. Genesis says God created light on day 1,
Right.
but he doesn't create the sun until day 4. So Ingersoll just asks this very simple question.
What was casting the shadows?
Exactly. How could you have a morning and an evening without a sun to rise and set? He's showing that the authors just didn't understand basic astronomy.
And then, of course, the flood. Today, I think most people see Noah's Ark as a story, a metaphor. But he was talking to people who believed it was literal history.
So he pulls out a calculator, basically. He looks at the dimensions of the ark from the Bible and asks, okay, is this boat really big enough for millions of species?
The logistics are just a total nightmare.
He asks about the food. You have lions and tigers. They're carnivores. Did Noah bring a few thousand extra sheep just to be lion food? What about fresh water for a whole year?
And who is cleaning up after this floating zoo?
8 people. The image is absurd, and that's his point. It's funny, but he's trying to make people realize they have turned off their critical thinking.
If you need a miracle to explain your math, you've lost the argument.
That's it. But, and this is a really important pivot, his critique wasn't just about facts and figures, it was moral.
Yes. He didn't just hate the Bible because he thought it was false. He hated it because he thought it was immoral.
That's the real core of his argument. He moves from, is this true, to, is this good? And he looks at the Old Testament laws about slavery. He calls it inspired slavery.
He quotes the passages where God supposedly tells the Israelites it's okay to buy people as property.
Yes. Of the heathen that are round about you shall you buy bondmen and bondwomen. And Ingersoll just turns to his audience and asks, how can you worship a God who authorizes slavery? How is that holy?
And then there's the treatment of women, starting with the rib story.
Oh, he found the creation of Eve to be one of the most degrading myths ever. The idea that this all-powerful creator had to perform surgery on Adam to make a woman almost as an afterthought.
And then she's immediately blamed for everything.
Right. It sets women up as the source of all trouble from day 1. He argued that story was used for thousands of years to justify oppression. His bigger point was, what kind of character is this God? A God who orders genocide, demands sex slaves, and drowns the entire world.
He said that a civilized human being is more moral than the God of the Old Testament.
That's the knockout punch. He's judging God by human standards and saying, if a man did this, we would call him a monster. Why do we worship a spirit who does it?
So, okay, let's say you're in the audience in 1880. You're nodding along. The creation story doesn't make sense. The morality is awful. But then the panic sets in. If I give all this up, what's left?
And Ingersoll knew that question was coming. He wasn't a nihilist. He had an answer. It's his gospel of humanity.
Beautifully simple.
Happiness is the only good. The time to be happy is now. The place to be happy is here.
And the way to be happy is to make others so.
That's his whole creed. But notice what's missing. There's no requirement to believe anything.
And that's the key. Traditional Christianity at the time said salvation was all about belief. You could be a great person, but if you didn't believe the right things, you were damned.
Ingersoll found that idea morally repulsive because, and this is a key psychological point for him, belief isn't a choice.
You can't force your mind to believe something.
No. The mind works on evidence. He said, I can show you a red apple and tell you it's blue. You can say it's blue because you're afraid of me, but you cannot honestly believe it's blue.
So an honest God would never punish you for using the brain he supposedly gave you.
Why give us reason and then send us to hell for using it? It makes no sense.
And speaking of hell, we have to talk about his absolute hatred for that doctrine. He called it the infinite horror.
He thought it was the single most evil idea the human imagination had ever come up with. Think about it. For the, 70 or 80 years of mistakes you make in a finite life, you deserve eternal torture.
The punishment doesn't fit the crime. It's not even close.
He called it a libel against any decent creator. He said even the cruelest human judge wouldn't sentence someone to burn forever. So the church, by preaching hell, was painting God as a tyrant worse than any in human history.
He really wanted people to stop and visualize it, to stop just using the word and actually think about what eternal pain means.
He believed if people truly understood it, their own decency would force them to reject it.
So if you reject the dogma, you reject the fear, you land at agnosticism. but he had this really beautiful definition for it.
Intellectual hospitality.
I love that phrase.
It just means keeping the door of your mind open. It's the humility to say, I do not know. Religion claims absolute certainty about things no one can possibly know. Ingersoll was content to just wait for evidence.
It's about integrity over safety, which brings us to the company he kept. He spent a lot of time defending other so-called infidels.
People like Thomas Paine. Paine was a hero of the American Revolution, but he also wrote The Age of Reason, which attacked the Bible. So the church just vilified him, tried to erase him.
And they spread those deathbed myths. We still hear them today. Did you hear that famous atheist recanted on their deathbed?
It's the exact same tactic. They spread stories that Paine died screaming in terror, begging for a priest.
Why do that? What's the point?
It's the ultimate trump card. If the great infidel cracks at the end, it proves that deep down, religion is true and atheism is just a performance.
So Ingersoll went full detective on this.
He did. He tracked down the actual people who were there when Paine died, got sworn affidavits, proved he died peacefully, standing by his principles to the very end.
He wanted to clear their names.
He felt it was his duty. These were the pioneers of liberty, and the church was trying to slander their legacy into silence.
And in this big battle, Ingersoll had a champion that wasn't a person. It was a process. It was science.
Oh, he loved contrasting the miracles of Jehovah with the miracles of science. He'd say, look, what has the church actually accomplished? They've debated scripture for 1,000 years. What have they solved?
And then you look at what science has done.
The steam engine, the telegraph, anesthesia. He argued that science is the only true redeemer because it actually reduces human suffering in this world right now.
There's that great line where he says, every time we understand a natural law, a ghost dies.
Yes. When Ben Franklin invented the lightning rod, he took the thunderbolt out of God's hand and put it safely in the ground. Science cleanses the world of superstition by explaining it.
The supernatural is a deformed view of reality.
And science is what straightens it out.
So when you stack it all up, the manufactured gods, the mistakes of Moses, the horror of hell, the power of science, what's the final message? What is he actually asking people to do?
He's asking for a declaration of independence for the human mind. He said, liberty is the god of my idolatry.
Liberty from fear.
Liberty from the fear of hell, liberty from the tyranny of priests, liberty from old dead traditions. He wants us to shift our worship from the unknown to the known. Let's stop trying to please a God we can't see and start trying to help the people we can.
So it's a call to take responsibility. No one is coming to save us.
We have to save each other. That's the core of it all. The way to be happy is to make others so.
It's amazing how modern that feels, even though it's over a century old. But it does leave me with a question. Ingersoll was fighting the ghosts of his time, biblical literalism, hellfire revivalism. We don't really fight those same battles today.
Not in the same way, no. But human nature is the same. We still create our own sacred cows, things that are dangerous to question. And that's the thought I'd want to leave you with.
So the real question is, what are our ghosts?
Exactly. What are the beliefs, the political dogmas, the social norms that we're afraid to question today? What are the things we believe just because our tribe believes them?
Are we just manufacturing new gods?
We might be. Ingersoll took on the certainties of the 1800s with evidence and wit. What would happen if we treated our own modern certainties with that same level of intellectual hospitality, that same scrutiny?
Are we thinking freely, or are we just haunting a different house? That's a question worth asking.
It certainly is.
Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.